Who among the gods is like me? Let him step forward. Before me, no god was formed, and after me, there will be none.
There is something no priest ever dared to say, no synagogue ever clearly taught, that Yahweh our Lord was not always the only God. In the darkness of an ancient age, among gods whose names are no longer spoken, a light emerged, but not as you would expect. This is not a tale for those afraid of questions. It is the journey of one soul, through collapse, through silence, towards something unshakable. If this story stirs something within you, subscribe. Let us listen together to the whispers of Scripture. I am a Jew, a man without a home, without a temple. All I have left are memories and visions no one dares to believe. I was exiled to Babylon, and in that foreign land, I saw something no one dares to tell. They never told us the full story. Not in the synagogues, not in the scrolls they let us touch. For centuries they spoke as if Yahweh had always been alone, as if he stood above all without rival, without shadow. But the elders whispered things. And in the dark corners of Babylon we began to remember. We remembered the names El-Baal Asherah carved into stone beside his. We remembered the council and the voice that once asked, "Who will go for us? My name is not important. I am one of the exiles dragged from Zion, shackled by empire, stripped of temple language," and answers. But in this silence I have seen visions, not of what the priests teach, but of what was buried. This is the story of how Yahweh rose not merely above gods, but beyond them. Listen closely. Some truths do not shout, they whisper through fire and dust. They took everything. The walls we sang beside, the ark we dared not touch, the names we whispered by candlelight. Gone. The streets of Babylon are loud with foreign music and louder gods, statues of stone with painted eyes paraded through markets like kings. But in my soul, there is still Zion. I was a priest's son, born among scrolls raised beneath incense smoke. I knew the order of sacrifices before I could write my own name. I watched the high priest enter the Holy of Holies and emerge trembling. Now I carry bricks. My hands bleed. My back burns. My tongue speaks commands I do not believe. They shaved my head, branded my back, changed my name. But they could not take the vision. It came to me in the dead of night, not in sleep, but in stillness. A council, thrones of smoke, beings too vast for form, yet cloaked in robes of fire. And at the center, him. He stood as if the heavens themselves bent toward him. His voice was silence, his gaze a wind that stripped all pretense. The others circled 12-20, some with wings, some with eyes like emerald suns. One knelt, another shattered into dust. And then he spoke. "Who among the gods is like me?" I had heard this before, sung in psalms, chanted by Levites. But not like this. This was no poetry. This was a proclamation, and it tore through me. I woke with ash in my mouth. That day I could not speak. When the overseer barked orders I did not hear. I saw only fire. I heard only thunder. They told us there were no other gods, that Yahweh was eternal, alone, singular. But this vision, it was older than doctrine, more real than exile, and it would not leave me. All day the names whispered, El-Baal Asherah. Echoes carved in temple stones we'd long buried. Echoes my father had forbidden me to speak. Do not ask, he once warned. The Lord your God is one. But now I ask, if he is one, why did I see many if he is alone? Why do the scrolls say, "Let us make man"? And if he is unchallenged, why did he rise? Why not begin at the top? Why ascend? The prophets said Yahweh was mighty. They did not say he was alone. Not always. In my vision, he did not destroy the others. He outshone them. They bowed. They disappeared. And I, a slave with broken wrists, I saw the truth. Yahweh was not born a solitary God. He became one, by glory, by wisdom, by something no other could hold. And this is the secret in Babylonian ash. It is not a denial. It is a coronation. And if I am wrong, let the vision fade. But each night it returns. And now, when I walk past the statues of Marduk and Ishtar, I no longer tremble. Their eyes are paint. Their mouths are stone. But the one who spoke, he lives. Not just in heaven, but in fire, in question, in exile. Some say the gods of Babylon are stronger than ours. They point to the towering ziggurats, the armies, the empires that stretch beyond the horizon. They laugh at our broken songs, our scattered scrolls, our ruined temple. But power is not presence, and height is not holiness. When I walk the processional way, I see lion statues with golden eyes, walls painted in blue and flame. Priests of Marduk chant with confidence, but beneath their feet I feel it, the ground itself is uneasy. They do not know the one who speaks in silence. They do not know the God who chooses exile to shape eternity. Sometimes I wonder if the others still whisper in the shadows, those ancient gods with broken thrones and names lost to dust. But even if they do, they no longer rule. The vision showed me that. They were present, yes, but passive, reverent, diminishing in his light. What kind of God becomes greater after the fall of his temple? What kind of God loses everything and yet commands the stars? Only one. That is why I still believe. Not because of walls or priests or rituals, but because in the ruin he speaks clearer. In exile he draws nearer. And in the dark his glory burns brightest. Even the Babylonians, with all their chants and gold, fear the silence. They fill the air with sound so they don't have to hear the stillness where Yahweh waits. He does not compete. He abides. Not like them gods of thunder, of conquest, of wine and harvest. He is not loud. He is lasting. And that terrifies them more than any chariot or sword. So I will keep writing, even if no one reads, even if no one remembers my name, because Yahweh remembers, and that is enough. So I will keep writing, even if no one reads, even if no one remembers my name, because Yahweh remembers, and that is enough. But he did more than remember. One night he answered, not with thunder, not with fire, with a memory. One older than my people, older than the prophets, older than even the name Yahweh itself. But he did more than remember. One night he answered, not with thunder, not with fire, with a memory. One older than my people, older than the prophets, older than even the name Yahweh itself. I stood on a mountain that was not a mountain. It breathed, pulsed like a living thing. Below me stretched a plain wide as the sea where fires burned in circles, and men danced before statues with 100 faces. Their names echoed across the wind: Dagon, Molech, Chemosh, El. They were praised, feared, fed. Each had their portion, each had their throne. But among them stood one who was silent. He had no statue, no chants. He simply watched. And as the others demanded blood grain smoke, he waited. Not weak, but unwilling. Not silent, but slow. And when the priests turned their backs, when the dancers collapsed in drunken silence, he remained, still, present. He did not shine like the others. Not yet. But the ground knew him. The stars moved slightly when he looked upward. I watched as the gods grew restless. Some turned on one another. Others faded, their names swallowed by conquest and forgetfulness. But this one, he remained. Then one day a child came barefoot, trembling. He brought no offering. He spoke no chant. He simply knelt before the silent one and said, "If you are real, be with me." And the wind moved, only slightly, but enough. Enough for the boy to rise, eyes lit, bearing no mark, no blessing, but something deeper. Presence. This was how it began. not in thunder, not in conquest, but in nearness. One by one others came, not many, not mighty. Widows, orphans, outcasts, exiles. They came not with gold, but with grief. And the silent one received them. He never asked for blood. He never demanded praise. He only endured. And slowly the other names stopped echoing. Their statues cracked, their priests vanished. And still he remained. Time passed like wind on stone. And then he spoke, not aloud, not in language, but in truth. I am. And those 2 words were enough to erase 1,000 names. The name Yahweh did not come with trumpet or war horse. It came with stillness that could not be moved. And the mountain beneath me whispered, this was always his. I fell to my knees. I wanted to cry, to sing, to weep, but no sound came. Only breath, only awe. I woke on Babylonian soil, cold and alone, but I knew he was never just ours. He was never one among many. He was the one before the many, and after them, and beyond. That day I carved his name into the mud beside the river. Not in Hebrew, not in Aramaic, in silence. Because some truths are too deep for tongue. I saw cities rise around the fading gods. Temples of obsidian, of gold, of blood. Their worshippers wore purple silver bone. They chanted day and night. They carved laws into flesh. They swore oaths on thunder and flame. But their gods did not answer. Or if they did, it was hunger that spoke. And the people they obeyed, but they did not love. Their fear filled the streets like smoke. Their children vanished into fire. And still, the silent one remained. No monument, no army, just a presence unmoved, undemanding, undeniable. At first, the people ignored him. But when war came and famine followed and the loud gods stayed silent, they remembered the one who had never asked for anything. They began to whisper his name again, not aloud, not yet, but in grief, in secret, in the pauses between pain. One woman, barren for years, prayed not to win, not to boast, but simply to be seen. And she was. Another, a soldier dying alone, murmured, "If you are near, let me die with peace." And peace came. Not victory, not vengeance, just presence. It was then the people began to speak of him differently, not as a god of one tribe, but as something larger. A name not shouted but carried in breath. A name too holy to say but too near to forget. Yahweh. It was not a title. It was being itself. I am, the name before all names, and the only one that remained after. In time, even the priests of other gods came curious, desperate. They asked no questions. They offered no chance. They sat in the silence and wept. Some called it blasphemy. Others called it surrender. But those who stayed found peace. Not escape, not ease, but peace that wrapped around the bones and held them even in death. And so the name spread not like fire, but like seed. It grew in dry places. It bloomed in forgotten soil. Children whispered it before sleep. Old men clutched it with their last breath. It passed not from prophet to king, but from broken heart to broken heart, until it reached me, a slave, a nobody. But even here in chains I carry it, and it carries me. That is why I no longer fear the gods of Babylon. They are loud, they are tall, but they will fall, because they were made. But the one I saw, he simply is. And that is why his name remains, when all others turn to dust. And that is why his name remains, when all others turn to dust. I thought that was the end of the vision, but it was only the beginning. Because what I saw next was not a name, it was a war. I thought that was the end of the vision, but it was only the beginning. Because what I saw next was not a name, it was a war. Not of swords, not of armies, but of thrones. I stood once more on the living mountain, but this time it groaned, not in pain, but in labor. Below the plain was no longer wide. It was narrowing. collapsing inward, as if all creation had been called to a single point. And at that point, thrones, great, terrible thrones, each unlike the other. One carved from ice that never melted, one of roots and beasts howling with unseen hunger, one formed from burning scrolls, always writing, always aflame. And each throne bore a name not spoken but known. I saw them gathered, not in worship, not in peace, but in judgment, against one of their own. And there he was again, the silent one. He did not sit, he did not kneel. He stood, and they rose against him, not with weapons, but with memory. They spoke of times when he had walked with men, when he had rejected tribute, when he had refused to take what was offered. They called it weakness, they called it betrayal, they called him unworthy. And each time they spoke, a wind stirred, and the thrones trembled, not from him, but from the truth, because their power was built on taking, on being fed. And he had given. He had knelt beside lepers. He had walked in dust. He had heard the cries of slaves. And now they feared what he might become. One throne, a crown of serpents, hissed, "He does not belong." Another cracked in half as it spoke, "He does not rule." But he said nothing. He did not defend. He did not accuse. He simply looked at them. And one by one, they looked away. Their thrones, once blazing with might, began to dim. Because in his presence every lie collapsed, and in his silence every truth stood alone. Then came the moment. The thrones shook, not with violence, with choice. Each god, each presence was given the same path, bow or break. Some bowed and became dust. Others refused and faded, not destroyed, just removed. And when the plain cleared, when the mountain sighed, only one throne remained. It had no name, no shape, no crown. It was presence made place. And he, the silent one, sat. No trumpet, no declaration. Just weight, just truth. And I understood. This was not victory. It was revelation. He had not taken the throne. The throne had waited for him. And now, all others were still. The silence after was unbearable. Not because it lacked sound, but because it was full of knowing. Every corner of the plain remembered what had just happened. The wind carried no dust, only reverence. Even the stars, so often above, seemed to draw near as if watching the one who had remained. I looked around and saw the spaces where thrones once stood. No ashes, no ruins, only absence. Because what had ruled before was never meant to last. One throne had vanished with a scream, another with laughter that turned to weeping. But the most terrible was the one that simply sighed and dissolved. Each had tried to carry eternity. Only one could. He did not smile. He did not weep. He simply sat as if he had always been there. And perhaps he had. Perhaps the war had not been against him, but within them. Perhaps he never rose, they simply fell. Then I noticed something else. Where the plain had been now was a temple, not made of stone, not built by hands, but formed of memory of awe, a sanctuary made of stillness. And inside it, a flame. It burned without fuel, without smoke, without shade. Its light did not blind, it revealed. And in that light I saw every name, every title, every crown turn to breath. But his name, Yahweh, remained. Not carved, not spoken, felt. I fell again, not in fear, in recognition. Because now I understood he had not become greater. He had always been. And the war was simply how we saw it. He never fought. He waited, until every lie ran out of time. When I awoke, the earth beneath me was cold. Babylon roared around me, its markets, its gods, its madness. But inside, there was quiet, not absence. Presence. I did not speak of the vision. Not at first. Who would believe a slave? Who would listen to dust? But the silence in me began to speak without words. My captors noticed. They mocked my stillness. They feared my calm. One whispered, "He walks like one who has seen the end." Perhaps I had. Not the end of time, but the end of illusion, the end of noise, the end of fear, and the beginning of one. I began to write again, not to be heard, but so the truth would not be lost. Because one day someone will ask, "Where did the gods go?" And someone must answer, "They never stayed. Only one did. The one whose throne was not taken but waited for." They say the gods live above. So man built up. He stacked brick upon brick, stone upon stone, until the sky no longer seemed like heaven, just a ceiling to break through. And Yahweh watched. Not because he was threatened, but because he remembered. I saw it in a vision, a plain of green, vast and clean, before empires, before exiles, before names divided the earth. The people were one tongue, one heart, one fear. They did not fear gods. They feared being scattered. So they built, not a sanctuary, not a house, a tower, to touch heaven, not to reach Yahweh, but to replace him. They said, "Let us make a name for ourselves," not a name to honor, a name to remember, because they feared being forgotten more than being wrong. And Yahweh came down, not because he couldn't see, but because they couldn't. He descended into their unity and found pride dressed as purpose. He walked among the bricks, still wet with ambition. He listened to their chants, their hopes, their fear of vanishing. He did not smite. He scattered. Because the danger was not the height, but the why. The tower was tall, but the hearts behind it were hollow. They thought unity meant power, but unity without humility is fire without a flame. So he confused the tongue not as punishment, but mercy. So they could not speak lies with one voice. So they would need each other again. So the world would not be built on one prideful heart. I saw the tower fall, not with thunder, not with wrath, with wind. It crumbled under its own forgetting. And the people, they wept not because they lost heaven, but because they lost each other. I saw their hands calloused, cracked, bleeding, not from war, from work. They carried stone like it was sacred. They measured the sky and swore they would touch it. Children learned to shape bricks before they could speak. Mothers sang songs of ascent hymns not to heaven, but to human will. And slowly the tower rose. Not just in height, in legend. They began to tell each other, "There is no God above this. There is no need to kneel." Their words grew louder than prayer. Their eyes climbed higher than the clouds, until one day they could no longer see the ground. And Yahweh came down, not with fury, but with footsteps. Each step shook memory. Each glance uncovered intent. He saw the tower, but he looked deeper. He saw the pride behind every plan, the ache behind every boast, the wound beneath every brick. And he wept, not because he was threatened, but because he was forgotten. Because the ones he had breathed into now breathed only for themselves. He turned to leave, and as he walked away, their voices split, not with anger, but with difference. Suddenly a brick passed from one hand to another, and meaning failed. One man shouted, the other cried. One laughed, the other fled. And in moments the project of pride collapsed, not because Yahweh destroyed it, because they could no longer build it together. And I, the exile, watched from beyond the centuries. I was not there, but I saw it, felt it, as if my own breath had once shaped that clay. And I realized, we are still building. Not towers of brick, but of steel, of ego, of empires and economies. Babylon is not a city, it is a pattern. And we are still afraid to be scattered, still afraid to be forgotten. So we build, and climb, and chant new names. Progress, power, platform. And still Yahweh watches, not to destroy, but to reveal. To show us that when we build without him, we build without end. We speak more, but understand less. We connect faster, but know no one. And I write this not in judgment, but in hope. Because the same God who scattered Babel can gather hearts again, not through one tower, but through one spirit. Not to make us alike, but to make us whole. I wake each day in Babylon, but I remember Babel. And when I speak, I ask for words not of pride, but of peace, not to build upward, but inward, so that heaven need not be reached, only received, so that heaven need not be reached, only received. And yet, even as I wrote these words, I heard the drums of Babylon, not of war, but of worship. Another vision came upon me, one darker than the last. I saw the statue, tall, golden, shining with a light that did not come from heaven. And I heard the command, bow or burn. It stood taller than any temple. Its gold shimmered like the sun, but it gave no warmth. A statue built by command, crafted by fear. Nebuchadnezzar's image, not of a god, of himself. Every inch polished, every angle sharpened. It was not built to inspire. It was built to demand, and demand it did. The herald cried, "All peoples, nations, and tongues, when you hear the music, fall down and worship the golden image." A pause. Whoever does not fall and worship shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace. And the music played, flutes, harps, horns, a symphony of submission. And thousands fell, some quickly, some slowly, some weeping, some eager, but all bowed, except three shadows against a sea of bent backs. 3 men who stood not in defiance, but in devotion. Not to the statue, to something unseen. The officials gasped, the guards hesitated, but the furnace roared. And the king, he did not plead. He raged. "Is it true," he spat, "you will not serve my gods or worship my image?" The men did not tremble. They spoke, "Our God is able to deliver us. But even if he does not, we will not bow." And they were bound, and they were thrown, and the fire consumed. Nothing, not them, not even their robes, because inside the fire they were not alone. The watchers saw it. A 4th figure, like a son of the gods, walking with them in the flames. The king fell silent. He called them out. And they emerged, not singed, not scarred, only free, because the fire that was meant to destroy had revealed what chains could not hide: faith. I watched from the shadows of exile. I had seen many fall before idols. I had fallen myself not in body, but in silence. But these 3, they did not shout, they did not argue. They simply stood. And that was louder than 1,000 trumpets. Around them, fear moved like smoke. Men trembled not because they believed, but because they remembered. They remembered the God who walked with Abraham, the God who thundered on Sinai, the God who had once dwelled among them. And now was he still near. The fire burned to answer, but it spoke a different truth. Because when they stepped into the flames, they stepped into faith, not the kind that demands rescue, but the kind that accepts presence. I saw the 4th man, not as a vision, not as a ghost, but as glory. He did not pull them out. He walked with them, because Yahweh does not always extinguish the fire. Sometimes he enters it, not to save us from pain, but to prove we are not alone in it. The crowd fell silent. The king trembled, and I wept, because in their defiance I saw my failure, and in their deliverance I saw my hope. The king called out, not in anger, in awe, "Servants of the Most High God, come out." And they did. Their bonds had burned, their clothes remained, their breath steady. The fire had touched everything except what mattered. The crowd drew near, not to worship the men, to witness the God who had not prevented the fire but had entered it. The king spoke again. "No other God can save in this way." And he made a decree, but I heard more than his words. I heard silence shift. I heard pride kneel. I heard hearts remembering. Not all believed, not all changed, but a question had entered the furnace and came out alive. What if we are not alone? That question burned deeper than the flames. I returned to my writing, not because I had answers, but because I had seen what cannot be explained. They stood, they burned, and they did not fall, because Yahweh was with them. And I knew then, faith is not the absence of fear. It is standing anyway, not because we are brave, but because He is near. And that is enough. And that is enough. If this story stirred something in you, you're watching Verse and Wisdom, where silence speaks and fire reveals. Subscribe if you've ever stood in a furnace of your own, and share this with someone who needs to remember they are not alone. And now, another vision came, not of fire, but of feasts, of kings drunk on gold and a hand that wrote without ink, the writing on the wall. It began with laughter, not the kind born of joy, the kind that drowns silence, that mocks the still to forget what it fears. Belshazzar, king of Babylon, threw a feast for 1,000 nobles. The wine flowed, the music shook the walls, the women danced, and the sacred was defiled. He called for the goblets, the ones taken from the temple of Yahweh, not to honor, to mock. They poured wine into vessels once used for sacrifice. They toasted gods of gold, silver, and stone. And Belshazzar laughed. But the wall did not. It stood cold, silent, watching. Then it moved. A hand, just a hand, appeared. It had no arm, no body, no voice. Just fingers writing. The room froze. The laughter died mid-breath. The goblet dropped and shattered. Because the wall now bore words no man could read, but every heart feared. The king turned pale. His knees knocked together. His strength melted. He called for magicians, for enchanters, for wise men. None could read it. Because truth is not decoded, it is revealed. And only one was found in exile, a remnant. Daniel. He stood where none dared. He read what heaven wrote. Mene tekel parsin. Counted, weighed, divided. Daniel did not bow. He did not flatter. He stood with the weight of years on his back and the fire of truth in his voice. He looked at the king and saw not a crown but a deadline. You have been weighed in the balance, he said, and found wanting. He spoke of Nebuchadnezzar, how the king's pride had turned to madness, how Yahweh had restored him only when he looked upward. But you, Belshazzar, Daniel whispered, you knew all this. And still you lifted yourself against the Lord of heaven. The room held its breath, because this was not prophecy. This was judgment. Daniel pointed to the words again. Men, God has numbered your days. Tekel, you have been weighed and found too light. Parsin, your kingdom is divided and given away. And then he turned and walked out, not as a rebel, as a witness. That night the Medes entered Babylon. The gates were unguarded, the walls unshaken. But the kingdom was already broken, not by sword, by sentence. I watched from a rooftop. The stars above were silent, but something deeper had spoken. Because when heaven writes, earth cannot erase. And I had once feared Babylon, its towers, its laws, its kings. But that night I feared something else, a soul too heavy with pride and too light with truth. Belshazzar had wealth but no weight. He wore gold but carried nothing eternal. And the writing on the wall was not just for him. It is for every throne built on forgetfulness, every voice that drowns out the whisper of God. I closed my eyes and I saw not just Babylon, but every empire that would follow. And I asked, what is weighed in the balance of heaven? Not armies, not monuments, but hearts. Only hearts. And when those are found wanting, nothing else can stand. So I write again for those who still hear the silence. Because the day will come when the wall will write again. And blessed is the one who has already listened. And truth once planted never truly sleeps. It waits until the world is ready again. I thought the visions would end. But then I saw beasts. One like a lion, one like a bear, one like a leopard, and one that had no name. This was not history. This was what comes after. It began with wind, 4 winds striking the sea from every side. And from the churning water rose beasts. The first a lion with eagle's wings, majestic, fierce, but then its wings were torn off and it stood like a man, and a heart was given to it. Then came the second, a bear raised on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth. It was told, Arrows devour much flesh. Then a leopard with 4 wings, 4 heads, and it was given dominion. Then the fourth. It had no name, no comparison. Iron teeth, bronze claws, 10 horns. And from those horns a smaller one rose with eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. I watched it trample, break, crush, until the thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, clothed in white as snow, hair like pure wool, throne of fire, wheels of flame. Thousands upon thousands attended him. The court sat. The books were opened, and the beast was slain, its body destroyed and thrown into burning flame. The others lost their power, but were allowed to live a little while longer. Then I saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. To him was given authority, glory, and a kingdom, one that will not pass away, one that will never be destroyed. I trembled, not because of the beasts, but because I understood them. Each one was a kingdom, each claw, each wing, each horn a throne, a name, a banner soaked in conquest. And the fourth was like none before. It did not rule by glory, it ruled by fear. Its power was not strength, it was control. It did not roar, it spoke small proud words that pierced deeper than swords. And when it rose, the others faded, but not the Ancient of Days. He did not rise to fight, he sat, because true power does not rush, it reigns. And when he opened the books, he did not shout, he judged. The beast that seemed unstoppable burned like chaff before wind. Its horns cracked, its voice fell silent, and I realized, no matter how loud the earth grows, heaven does not need to compete, because in the end the court will sit, and the books will speak. And the Son of Man, he did not seize power, he received it, given by the Ancient One, not with sword, but with glory. And the kingdom he received was unlike the others. No blood, no beast, just light. And I wondered, could this kingdom begin now? But the vision did not end. It pierced deeper, because after the beasts, after the fire, after the glory, there was still me, a man in exile, in Babylon, surrounded by voices that still echoed the beasts. And I realized, the vision was not just about kingdoms, it was about hearts. Because every beast first lives in the soul of man, the lion pride, the bear violence, the leopard ambition, and the last, fear masked as power. I saw them not just on thrones, I saw them in mirrors, and I wept. Because the kingdom of the Son of Man cannot be inherited. It must be received. And to receive it, we must let the beasts die, not in history, but in ourselves. So I closed the scroll, not to forget, to remember rightly, because a day is coming when the clouds will break again, and he will descend, not to take sides, but to take over. And blessed are those who have already yielded, those who, though still in exile, live as citizens of the kingdom without end. Another vision came to me. I was by the river Ulai, and I looked and saw a ram, 2 horns, one higher than the other, and the higher came up last. The ram charged westward, northward, southward. No beast could stand before it. None could deliver from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. But then a goat, swift, furious, its feet never touched the ground. It had a single horn between its eyes, and it came at the ram with rage. It struck, the ram broke its 2 horns. The ram fell, was trampled, and no one could rescue it. Then the goat grew even greater, but at its peak its horn shattered. And from it came 4, and from one of those 4 a little horn rose, small but growing. It threw stars from heaven. It trampled the sanctuary. It exalted itself against the Prince of Heaven. It stopped the daily sacrifice. It prospered for a time, and I was stunned, because the horn did not rise by strength, but by deception, not by armies, but by pride disguised as righteousness. I had seen beasts before, but this was different. The ram was not cruel, just sure. It conquered because it could. It moved because none stopped it. And the goat, it came like wind, a fury with direction. The clash was not of good and evil. It was of hunger and pride. And when the ram fell, there was no mourning, only silence. Then came the shattering. The goat, now great, broke, not by war, by reaching too far. And that was when the true danger rose. Not a kingdom, a horn, a whisper that became a decree, a shadow that touched heaven. It spoke like truth. It acted like light. But everything it touched dimmed. The sacrifices stopped. The holy places trembled, and none stood in its way. Because it did not ask for worship. It demanded agreement. It did not crush with armies. It clouded with lies. And I saw something terrible. Power without shape. Deceit without face. A dominion built not on blood, but on blurred lines. And I realized, the most dangerous beast is the one that looks righteous. I fell on my face. Not from awe, from weight. Because I knew this vision was not distant. It was creeping, not in empires, in minds. Gabriel came to me not as a comforter, but as a clarifier. Understand, he said, this vision concerns the end. Not of time, of deception. The ram, Media and Persia. The goat, Greece. The horn, something beyond. A power that rises not from nations, but from within them. It throws truth to the ground. It exalts itself above heaven. And it prospers until it is broken, not by hand. And then I lay sick for days. Because once you've seen the beast behind the veil, you cannot unsee it. The world did not change, but I had. I wrote, not to warn, to witness. Because the day will come when the horn will rise again, and many will say, it is good. But blessed is the one who still remembers what light feels like. Let the wise stay awake. In the first year of Darius, I opened the scroll of Jeremiah. 70 years. That's what he wrote. 70 years of desolation and then a return. My heart burned, because the time was near. So I did not wait. I fasted, I wore sackcloth and ashes, and I prayed. Not with pride, not with anger, but with confession. O Lord, I said, great and awesome God, we have sinned. We have turned away. We have not listened. I did not blame Babylon. I did not blame kings. I blamed us. I remembered the covenant. I remembered the mercy. And I pleaded, do not delay. For your sake, O Lord, shine your face again upon your sanctuary and upon your people. And as I prayed, as the words still hung in the air, Gabriel came. Swift, brilliant, terrifying. And he spoke, Daniel, I have come to give you understanding, not just of the past, of what is to come. He said, 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city. Not 70 years? 70 times more. To finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness. I could barely breathe. He spoke of a coming one, an anointed one, a prince. He would come, but not to rule, to be cut off, not for himself. He would confirm a covenant. He would face desolation. He would stop the sacrifice not by force, but by becoming it. And then, a desolator would come, and yet even he would meet his end. Not by man. I could not grasp the days. The numbers blurred, but the message was clear. Before the final peace, there must be pain. Before restoration, a reckoning. The Holy One would come into a world still torn by beasts. He would not raise an army. He would bear a cross. And by his wounds we would be healed. I fell silent. Because prophecy is not puzzle, it is path. And I had just seen the first step. I sat in the ashes, the scroll of Jeremiah beside me, the words of Gabriel still ringing. I had prayed for an end. God answered with a beginning. I asked for a return. He spoke of redemption, but it would not come swiftly, nor painlessly, because mercy is not soft. It is sharp. It cuts before it heals. I thought of my people still scattered, still waiting. I thought of the sanctuary still desolate, still yearning for glory. But then I remembered. We had not been forgotten. We had been prepared. Because the prince who would come would not just restore walls. He would rebuild hearts. He would walk into the brokenness we could not fix. He would bear the wrath we could not escape. And in the end, he would not delay. So I returned to the scroll, to the fast, to the prayer, because the promise had not failed. It had just begun. Some visions bring answers. This one brought hope, and hope once seen does not die. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, a word was revealed to me. I had mourned for weeks. No meat, no wine, no ointment on my skin. Then by the river Tigris I looked up, and I saw a man clothed in linen, his waist girded with gold, his face like lightning, his eyes like fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze, his voice like the sound of a multitude. I was not alone, but only I saw. Those with me fled trembling, and I was left without strength. My limbs failed, my breath vanished, my face to the ground. Then a hand touched me, lifted me, set me trembling on my knees. And he said, "Do not fear, Daniel. From the first day you set your heart to understand, your words were heard. I have come because of them. But the prince of Persia withstood me for 21 days. He continued, "Behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. I was detained there with the kings of Persia." I stared, still trembling. Because this was no myth, no symbol. It was war, unseen, unheard, unrelenting. And my prayers, my whispers in the night, had been weapons. I had thought heaven was silent, but it was battling. Not for nations, for insight, for me. The man in linen looked at me. He was not tired, but I was. And still he spoke again. "I have come to make you understand what is to happen in the latter days. For the vision is yet for many days to come." Again I bowed face to the ground. No breath left in me, but a hand strengthened me, and I stood barely. I was a man bearing visions too great for a human frame, yet still I listened. Because when heaven speaks, even dust must rise. He spoke of kings, many kings, north and south, rise and fall, plots and betrayals, years that would stretch like rivers across the future. But even as he spoke, I could not follow all. Not yet. Because this was not a map. It was a message. History, yes, but more than that, a warning. That behind every crown there are shadows, and behind every throne a battle. Some will rise by cunning, others by cruelty, and many will fall forgotten by time, but not by heaven. And still there will be one who comes speaking flatteries, profaning the covenant, setting up abominations that desolate. He will seem unstoppable, unbreakable, but the end is already written, and the wise will understand. So I listened, not because I understood all, but because I trusted the one who reveals. And in the silence after the vision, I remembered, we are not meant to carry heaven, only to receive it one word at a time. Blessed are those who listen slowly. The man in linen continued. He named kings, not once or twice, but in waves. A king of the south, a stronger king rising in the north, alliances through marriage, betrayals sealed with gifts, armies raised, empires clashed, again and again. But there was a pattern. Power rose and fell. Greed surged and shattered, and behind every throne was another hand. The kings warred, but heaven recorded. Then he spoke of a contemptible one, a king who would rise without honor. He would flatter, deceive, invade peaceably. He would enter the holy places. He would remove the daily sacrifice and set up the abomination that brings desolation. He would exalt himself above every god, speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He would prosper, but only for a time, and those who know their God would resist him. They would fall, be refined, be tested, until the end comes at the appointed time. This king did not conquer with sword. He conquered with speech. He divided lands for profit. He honored no god but his own ambition. He trusted no covenant except the one he wrote in secret. He set his palace between seas, and the world marveled. But not heaven, because the end had been marked. And the wise, they did not rise against him with arms. They stood by truth. They fell in battle. They suffered in silence. They burned not with rage, but with righteousness. And the world watched and called them foolish. But heaven called them refined. Because fire does not only destroy, it reveals. And I wept, not for the kings, not for the wars, for the silence, the seeming triumph of what should not be. And yet, the man in linen never paused. He never flinched. Because what looked final was already fading. Even in the rise of the wicked, the seeds of their fall had been sown. And then his end. No warning, no grand finale. Just no helper, no voice, no rescue. He who had exalted himself above all gods was brought low by no hand. Not in battle, in silence. Because eternity does not argue. It outlasts. And the scroll closed. I looked around, and history had not changed. But something in me had. Because I saw the pattern, the cycle of pride, the seduction of power, the momentary triumph of lies. And yet, none endured. Only truth remained. I thought of those who would resist. The wise, the faithful. They would not be famous, they would not be spared, but they would shine. Because in a world gone dim, even one light is not forgotten. So let the proud rise, let the corrupt scheme. Their day comes quickly, their fall quiet. But those who know their God will endure, and in the end they will stand. Then the man in linen raised his hands, both of them, toward heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever. It shall be for a time, times and half a time. When the shattering of the holy people comes to an end, then all these things will be finished. But I did not understand. So I asked, what shall be the outcome of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves, be refined, made white. But the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. He spoke of days of waiting of blessing for those who endure. And then he was gone. I stood still. The river flowed beside me. The wind moved through the reeds, but I could not move. Because the vision had not ended in triumph. It ended in mystery. And yet it was enough. Because he had said, those who sleep in the dust shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And I understood not with my mind, but with my soul, that no beast, no king, no horn, not even death would have the final word. The dust would not hold us, the tombs would not win. Because one was coming not in visions, but in flesh. He would descend into the furnace, into the lion's den, into the exile we could not escape. And from there he would rise, to gather the wise, to awaken the dust, to shine forever. So I went my way, not because I understood all things, but because I trusted the one who does. I returned to the city of dust, to the ruins, to the silence. But my eyes had seen glory. I had stood in fire and had not been burned. I had lain among lions and had not been torn. And more than that, I had heard the voice of heaven. So I waited. Because I had been told, "You shall rest, and you shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days." And that was enough for me. Because the end is not the end. Not for those who are held by the Ancient of Days. You've just journeyed through the book of Daniel, a testimony of beasts and bravery, of visions and valleys of exile and everlasting hope. Thank you for listening, for walking with the prophet through the fire. If this story stirred your soul, follow this channel not for answers, but for echoes of the ancient truth. And until the next story, may you stand firm like Daniel. May your light shine like the stars. And may your heart always wait for the one who will rise. Shalom.